Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming in on another episode of Topic UFO. Tonight, our guest is Roger Marsh, and I'm sure a lot of you already know Roger, and if you don't, you've probably read something by him, as he has written all sorts of articles regarding UFOs, both on Examiner.com and also for MUFON, and probably other places as well. So we'll ask him about that. Roger is a UFO writer, a author, a playwright, and an independent filmmaker. Besides that, he is the director of public relations for MUFON. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get Roger on. Mr. Roger, are you there, sir?
Hey, I'm here. Glad to be here, Rick.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Boy, I tell you, reading your bio, you must be a busy man.
I love every minute of it.
Well, that's
I
what...
like to just keep evolving. I like to keep doing one thing to the next and just keep adding different media in. It just keeps me busy and really enjoy it.
And when it's fun, it's not really work, right?
Exactly.
Sometimes.
Because what's not in my bio is I also write comedy.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've got a series of 25 literary properties of mine I'm releasing over the next 3 months. All fiction, all comedy.
Comedy and UFO. That's a combination. That's a combination for sure.
Yes.
Well, listen, being that this show is called Topic UFO, and we don't have enough time to hit everything you do, I'm going to at least try to stay somewhat focused on the UFO topic.
Sure.
Before we get into what you do with UFO and writing, was there something that got you into that? Did you see something at some time? Did you have an experience, or did you just find it interesting?
Well, I actually, it's kind of in two parts. When I was growing up, I came from a family in southwestern Pennsylvania. I'm one of 8 children, and prior to me being born, I was child number 4. My parents had actually had a UFO sighting one night, very late one night, looking out a bedroom window. They saw a disc-shaped object hovering over a building across the street from where they lived. So kind of growing up in my family, but back in those days, kind of the 1960s, people didn't really talk that much openly about UFO sightings.
Right.
A lot of ridicule going on back in those days. But so I always called my parents kind of closet, UFO readers. So they would bring into the house a lot of books and magazines about UFOs. So I kind of got my basics there. But in 1973-74, southwestern Pennsylvania had just a high number of UFO sightings all in 1 year, a very, very high concentration. Actually, it was UFOs and Bigfoot all at the same time.
Wow.
And I was 16 years old, fall of 73, and I was outside just after dark one night. There were about maybe 10, 12 of us out. There were some parents on the street also. Just a typical suburban neighborhood street after dark. And so I remember somebody hollering out, "What's that?" And we all looked up down the street, and there was this disc-shaped object, and it was hovering, I would say, about 5 feet above the telephone poles. A telephone pole is about 40 feet, so you're looking at about 45 feet up. The thing was probably about as wide as a 2-lane road, in a suburban neighborhood, and it was lit up. The whole bottom of it was lit up the same color as the moon, and it was perfectly silent. That was the weirdest thing about it, and it came right at us at a very slow speed, and just kind of gently just swooshed, right over top of us, following, the lay of the land, the rolling hills in southwestern Pennsylvania, and just drifted away. It also came back twice that night at higher elevations, and it was being chased by what appeared to be military aircraft on the second and third time in our airspace.
Now,
that got me interested.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, you were with somebody, you say? Or,
Yeah, it was like probably late summer. Like a Friday or Saturday night. Very hot weather, and there was probably 10 or 12 of us. I was 16, so there was probably a group of teenagers. But it's sort of that time right when it gets dark. Some people were still out, maybe raking leaves or something, and
right.
there was kind of a combination of kids and adults out, in the neighborhood.
So it couldn't have been a group hallucination or anything like this. It was the real thing, right?
It was the real thing, and the neat thing about that story is that Stan Gordon was the Pennsylvania UFO researcher at that time. So he actually fielded all the cases, all the phone calls that came into his hotline back then, or state police, local police departments were forwarding everything over to Stan. And my parents actually knew Stan Gordon. So all these years passed, and Stan and I actually together worked on the book Silent Invasion, the Pennsylvania UFO Bigfoot casebook, which came out in fall of 2010. I was the editor on the book. Stan is the author on the book. So that was a really intensive 2 years worth of work, prepping that and going through all these cases that happened back then. So it was kind of a neat, turnaround for me.
Yeah, so you actually wrote this book about what you actually experienced. You were a...
Yes, my account is in there, but there's hundreds of accounts back then.
Wow.
And it was he calls it a case book, and it's kind of like an investigator's handbook, and he kind of moves through that era, that 1 year era, kind of like in a timetable, beginning to end. This happened, and then we got this call, and then this one, and went out and, on this investigation. So, and my father was actually part of his group, his investigation group. Occasionally would go out as a photographer, and I got to tag along back then. But actually seeing one of these objects, being within 45 feet of a silent object, I mean, it's right there in front of you. It can't be mistaken for a planet or, any of the common, things that people say, you're looking at this or you're looking at that. This was a three-dimensional object in a disc shape, probably about, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 feet wide, and maybe about 10 feet tall, kind of a domed-looking thing, disc-shaped on the bottom. And the bottom was completely lit up. The color, same color as the moon, is what it appeared to be.
So, I mean, what was your reaction, and what was the people's reaction around you? Did you just, completely freak out, or what?
I think everybody just stopped in their tracks. I've often said, had I been holding a camera, I think I would have just dropped it. You just sort of froze in your track, because you're looking at something that you don't know what it is, right. And it's coming right at you. It moves right over the top of you, and it was this feeling that it was a very heavy object, where you're listening to the displacement of the wind as it moves by. A very, very eerie kind of a feeling, like, wow, what was that? And it definitely, it seemed to be intelligently controlled. We weren't just looking, I don't think, at Mother Nature having fun, with lights and things like that. It just felt like it was intelligently controlled, and that it had substance to it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Now, how long after that 73, 74 time frame did you actually become involved in MUFON, or with MUFON?
Oh, many, many years passed. I still think I was part of that era where being part of that, you were ridiculed. Because I went to college, got a bachelor's degree in mass communications, went on to get a master's degree in journalism, and I spent 20 years in Chicago media working, and there's no way in that 20-year period, if I had talked about UFOs or the paranormal, it just didn't jive with that world.
Right. It's only been a few years, really, that it's been openly accepted to talk about, really,
Yeah, and that brings me to how did I get involved with MUFON, and that was actually an experiment. Just 3 years ago, I contacted the international director at that time was James Carrion. That would be 2 directors ago, and said, "Hey, look, I am a seasoned journalist. I'm a professional. I am degreed, and I'd like to try an experiment. I would like to try as a mainstream writer to cover MUFON and to cover UFOs full time. I just want to see what happens." So I looked around at the current media back then, and Examiner.com had been off the ground about 6 months. So I applied to be the Chicago UFO Examiner. And James Carrion said, "Yeah, do it. And I decided to specialize in the incoming reports, that come in daily. There's a public way of looking into the database, at a piece of the reports, as a public side of the report. So James had said, "Yes, do it," and I decided to do it. Within just a week, I was so popular at Examiner.com that the company called me and said, "Well, how would you like to be the national UFO Examiner?" Wow. And I said, "Great, wow, this is great." So they plugged me over into that, and I think that first year, I'm just going back on memory right now, so I might be slightly off on this, but I think I got something close to like 1.3, 1.5 million page hits in my first year.
Wow.
In work.
Now, when you say this was an experiment, is that what you mean by experiment? You wanted to see if this would catch on?
Right, because as I looked out at the UFO writing landscape across the country, and I'll say this the kindest way that I can, I think I saw a lot of well-intentioned people out there, but most of the writing, I could tell that they had no background in writing.
Right.
They had not studied it. They would say, "Well, this happened or that happened." There was no attribution. It's kind of no continuity to the stories. So I said, "Well, what if I take this subject and, which is kind of a pseudoscience, and what if I treat it like I'm a mainstream writer? Like I'm qualified. I could write for the New York Times. I'm at that level as a writer." And people loved it. I mean, I might have gotten a couple threatening letters over the years. Somebody says, "Go get a job," write about something real. But most of the letters I get, the emails, the phone calls, it's positive. It's like, "Wow, man, this is great." We have somebody that can actually provide attribution and the witness testimony. You have to clean that up because, the average person, just when they write these reports, they're usually written probably very fast,
Mm-hmm.
I have to clean it up a little bit.
Well, it's nice. It's nice to read a UFO article without getting to the end, and then the writer puts some stupid remark at the end to negate everything he's just written, because he doesn't want to be viewed as somebody, that believes in UFOs, right?
Exactly, right. And if you look at mainstream media today, even the networks, and you look at most of what comes out in print, they do exactly that, Rick.
Yep.
They want to cover their bases, even some of the best stuff I've seen at like network affiliates around the country, they have to say, "Scotty, beam me up" at the end. They have to do some little trick, or 90% of them have to use the theme music to, some well-known UFO show,
right.
That we all know, and it's the same thing.
Well,
over and over again,
Exactly. Not too long ago, they had that UFO press release thing at the press club in Washington, D.C., where all the ex or retired military guys got up and told about the UFO sighting
sure.
stuff. And there was a guy that wrote an article about it, can't remember his name, from the D.C. area there. And that's exactly what he did. He wrote this beautiful article, and then the last 2 sentences, or the last sentence, he made this stupid-ass remark. And I actually wrote him. I emailed him, and I said, "Why did you ruin this beautiful article? I mean, why did you feel you had to do that, Yeah,
that's the guy I refer to as the Cookie Monster.
Oh.
His remark was about cookies.
Yes, Yes.
He was trying to make a joke that the selection of cookies was the most interesting thing at the event. He was trying to be, hey, I'm cool, I'm funny,
Yeah.
and
I'm not part of them. I'm not,
right. And Robert had put on such a great, event.
Yes.
And he had done the work. He had written a great book on it, and he had done his research well. And he should have been taken seriously by the mainstream media. And they continue to avoid him.
Exactly. And I was surprised, sitting down and listening to all of those gentlemen's story, and then nothing. I mean, maybe an article here or there, but nowhere, or did he get as much publicity or recognition that he should have got, those gentlemen should have got. I thought it was just terrible that that happened.
Yeah, no, and that particular writer, researcher, that's Robert Hastings, by the way, who should get the credit for all of that.
Okay.
He and I continue to keep in touch, on a week-to-week basis, and I do cover, his latest work that he puts out. So he's still out there plugging, but yeah, the mainstream media, they're ignoring him. They're ignoring a lot of the facts that are out there.
So now, how long have you been writing the UFO articles for Examiner.com?
Yeah, just about 3.5 years now.
And how many articles do you think you've put out?
Oh, gosh.
Just on that one?
Yeah, just on that site. It's in the thousands. I think I'm up around 3,000, something like that.
Any super memorable one that sticks out in your mind as being the most interesting or the most bizarre?
Yeah, there's a few. The one that I tend to tell people, because I actually had the guy on a radio show. I had the witness. This was, I believe, I want to say it was a North Carolina couple, retired couple, and they had just finished dinner. It's dark outside. They're in the kitchen at the back of the house doing dishes now, just the two of them in the house. And the wife looks out into the backyard through the kitchen window, and she says, "Honey, what's that green blinking light out there in the backyard?" So the husband steps out into the backyard. He goes to the end of his yard to a little fence and looks over to the fence. And just on the other side of the fence, just 10, 12 feet away from where he's standing, there's this gigantic rectangular object floating about 3 feet off the ground. And I'm doing this on memory, so I might be a little bit off on the dimensions here, but let's say the thing is about 30 feet wide and about 60 feet long. It looks to be metallic. It's definitely rectangular. It's definitely completely silent, and it's hovering 3 feet off the ground. Now, he's staring at this and has absolutely no idea what this thing is, and all of a sudden it just tilts up a little bit and then just shoots away, like, like a bat out of hell, as they say, going from point A to point B in this terrific amount of time. And that's one, that type of a sighting, it's not like every sighting report that we get.
Right.
But we do, maybe 1 in 50 cases, the object is actually under 100 feet from the witness. These are the cases that most fascinate me. And the funny part about it is I had the guy live on a radio show one time, and I said, "Sir, I got to ask you, when you went back in the house, what did you tell your wife? What did you say?" I mean, it's gone. And I mean, that's 99% of every good UFO case. Like, the bumper didn't drop off of it. You know what I mean? We don't have, perfectly good video, audio. We don't have any of that. We just have a person that just, "What's that green light in my backyard?" And they go out and they have this experience. I mean, and they're all over the country like that. There's the woman from Oklahoma raising horses, and she has this ranch about 20 miles out of town, and she's out there at night feeding the horses in the field, and she just has this odd feeling and looks over her shoulder, and there's a gigantic, like 200 feet across, triangular object hovering about 50 feet above the barn. 50 feet above the barn, perfectly silent. This woman's by herself. She dives into her pickup truck, and she's got a decision to make, Rick. If she turns left, okay, which is the closest route to town, 20 miles to the next, her town, she's got to drive right under the object. If she turns right, it's 50 miles to the next town, but she doesn't have to drive under the object. She took the town 50 miles away. I mean, it's like,
Wow.
And this woman, I can tell you, we interviewed her. We sent people out, and it's like every month we are sending people to homes to talk to people who are extremely shook up. Well, you have the California ranchers, father and son, who see an object landing on their ranch in California. They call a neighbor who comes over in a pickup truck. They get flashlights together. They all jump into a pickup truck, and they go down to where this object is. And they're standing about 50 feet from it, these three men, staring at this object like, what the heck is this? All of a sudden, silently, the object just lifts up off to the ground, and as they look up in the sky, a piece of the sky, and it's dark out, looks fluid. And it just moves into this fluidness of a sky and disappears right in front of them.
Now, this is a recent case?
That case is probably 2 years old.
Well, that's recent. That's recent. My Lord.
Yeah, it's weird, and then we get so many cases where it appears as though the military's chasing these vehicles, or something happens. We had 3 years ago, the two teenagers out on a date out in Nevada. Okay, and they're kind of outside of a big town. They're out there, like in the boonies, and they see. I believe that one was multiple. I think it was 3 triangle objects, and they pulled over to the side of the road, and the boyfriend, and please, everybody at home, don't try this, but he had a spotlight on the side of his car, and he tilted the spotlight up and signaled one of them, and one of the objects actually stopped and came down to about 50 feet over their car, and hovered. And these two kids, I mean, I think they were like 17, 18. They freaked out. The kid drove the girlfriend home, then went to his house, got his father, told his father what happened. They went back. They tried to get back to the same spot so they could show Dad what had happened. As they got near that spot, they see all these Jeeps, like with closed up windows, dark windows, and they see helicopters shining, spotlights down onto the ground. I mean, there's this whole investigation going on. Excuse me, but somebody's investigating that report that's organized and they know what they're doing. I mean, why would all those people be at that spot right after these people had that incident happen to them?
Well, let me ask you a question. Say just over the past 3 years, because to me it seems like the whole UFO phenomenon has gained a lot of momentum, say in the last 3 years, with Ancient Aliens and just a lot more on TV about them. Is there anything that, or what do you see most notice about the reporting, the changes in reporting, say, the past 3 to 5 years? Have they changed in any way, or are they getting closer than what they used to do you think? Or
well, that is a very popular question, and I think it's one that's constantly being asked. I think ufologists in their country, we're all looking over our shoulders asking that same question. I tend to believe, personally, that it's just our communications are better now.
Yes, yeah.
People, nowadays, with a smartphone, you could actually have a UFO sighting and report it to MUFON within minutes.
Right.
Especially with, the internet, we got that, in 93, 94, sometime in the early 90s, and then websites, after that started to pop up. Otherwise, how did you do this in the 60s and 70s? You probably had to just go inside and handwrite everything down, or go to a typewriter and type it out and mail it in somewhere. Well, how many people are going to do that?
Yes, and a lot of people didn't even want to be associated with anything UFO back then, too.
Right, exactly, because we feel, you'll hear numbers, okay, like 95% of every UFO that's reported we can explain.
Right.
As something man-made or something natural. It's the 5% that we can't explain. But also you'll hear people say, we only think about 5% of UFO sightings are actually being reported. So you got another huge database out there. You have people like my wife, you know, who has absolutely no interest in UFOs. History major.
Join the club.
You know, right, absolutely nothing. And she's driving home from work. We're in Chicago. She's on an 8-lane expressway, okay? And it's a torrential downpour. I mean, you're going 15, 20 miles an hour. Windshield wipers are on high. You know, she's on her way home from work. You know, she's kind of bent forward, you know, squinting, making sure that, you know, she's not going to hit anybody. And all of a sudden she looks up through the windshield to the right, and she sees this object coming down out of the sky. I mean, kind of a weird-looking metallic thing, you know, and it comes right down to the ground level, you know, right alongside the highway. And she looks out across the 8-lane highway. Everybody comes to a stop. Everybody starts braking it and slowing down, and everybody's staring at this object. And she said it just, you know, hovered there for a few seconds. And she said, you know, it wasn't a helicopter. It wasn't a plane. It's this weird-looking, you know, shape. It's metallic. And she said all of a sudden it just shoots straight back up into the sky, and the traffic started moving. So she comes home. She tells me the story. Then she turns to me and says, hey, what's for dinner?
Yeah, by the way, what's for dinner?
Right, I guarantee you, if I had never followed up, that's the last she would have brought that up. I don't know what it was. It was this weird thing that came down out of the sky. And I'm like, no, call the White House. You know, please. Call Cheyenne. Don't they have the people up at the mountain on the machines, you know?
It's always those people that have these great sightings. Why can't we have these great sightings? We want to see them, you know?
Right.
Oh, geez. Well, listen, before we get too far along, I wanted to touch base on your work with MUFON.
Sure.
So I take it you write the monthly journal for UFO or MUFON,
Well,
or you edit it?
I'm the editor.
You're
yes.
the editor, and then you're also the director of public relations. Now, have you been called into duty as the director of public relations? And what kind of things would you be doing as the public?
Yeah, that's kind of we have my goals. I've only been doing that for 2 weeks.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Just for a couple weeks. I mean, for example, last week I worked with an NBC affiliate in Texas. They were following up on some weekend reports down there in a certain area. My job is usually to hook up the networks with the state director, and then the state director can then, you know, open a door to a field investigator. And then in some cases, like today, I was working with a Fox News affiliate up in they're interested in a case in New Hampshire that I just covered a couple of days ago. But I think it's a affiliate out of Vermont somewhere. But anyway, they were trying to, again, hook up with the witnesses. So I have a call into the witness for them, that kind of a thing. It's kind of the day-to-day things. I do, you know, as part of my job, I do release, you know, stories every day, at least 5 days a week, to Examiner.com on the incoming stuff. Once a month, on the first of every month, I do release, you know, it's the based on the MUFON statistics from the previous month, I do a national UFO alert.
Yes, I saw that. Now, something I wanted to ask you about, I read in one of your articles, you give the alerts like a numeric level of some sort.
Yes.
They're rated as a numeric level. Can you tell us about that a little bit, what that means?
Yeah. Yeah, thinking like the DEFCON system, back in like the 60s and 70s, where they had a, rating kind of a thing. Well, what I do is I put the whole country on the first of the month into a UFO Alert 5, which is the lowest level. A number 1, I've never issued a UFO Alert 1 or 2. What I do is I take states that are, I think they have to have 25 cases for the month or higher. The highest reporting state is usually California. Last month they had 77 reports. So, for example, on the 1st of May, I declared that California, Texas, Pennsylvania, and Florida were officially moved up into a UFO Alert 3 status. And then anybody with, I think it's possibly 15 or more cases, you're a UFO Alert 4 status. I do what I call the watch states. Anything that's 10 or more becomes a watch state, and then everybody else is a Category 5. It just gives you some kind of a sense of where it's happening.
Exactly. Now, what would need to happen to go to a 2 and a 1? 2 or a 1?
Oh, I don't, Rick. I'm not even sure. I would think.
Does that mean is 1 they're actually here, or?
Yeah, I think a 1 you better be getting into the bunker. So we kind of laugh about it. Like, I don't know. There would have to be some kind of an escalation happening to go to a 2.
I see.
And I would think that I haven't even imagined what I would do to declare a 1.
So it's not just number of sighting that plays into this formula. It could be other activities.
Yeah, it could be. Right now, it's simply the number of sightings.
Gotcha.
And I do point out that, like for example, the sphere is the most commonly reported item, and then you go through the triangles and the rectangles and the cigars and the discs, all the various shapes that happen. I put the numbers in, how many were this, how many were that each month. But I think to get up to an alert 2 or a 1, there'd have to be something else significantly happening in on top of just the numbers.
So between your work with MUFON and your work at Examiner.com and anything else you're doing UFO related, you're pretty much UFO 24/7, it seems like, huh?
It is, yeah. Incredibly, it is. It was a situation, I had a whole different life in Chicago for 20 years. And then sadly, my wife became ill. She had a series of strokes. And we decided, gee, is she going to have to go into a long-term care home? How are we going to do this? As a couple, we had to decide. And if it were me, I would have wanted the same decision. She wants me to take care of her at home.
Oh, yeah.
So we decided to get out of fast-paced Chicago, and we actually moved out of a neighborhood where the average home price was $500,000. Yeah, just terrible. The prices in Chicago just keep climbing and climbing. So we came back where I'm originally from, Westmoreland County in southwestern Pennsylvania. Came here. We bought a beautiful vintage home that we're restoring. And so she has a first-floor bedroom and bathroom. I can take care of her. My office is on the first floor. So, yeah, I'm UFOs 24/7 now.
Wow.
My whole life. And when I'm not busy doing something, answering the phone, tracking down a report, or, showing the media, where the story's at, I'm probably working on some kind of a piece of comedy for something.
Yeah, to jump from back and forth between UFO and comedy, that's quite a... Do you think about funny stuff when you're working on your UFO and vice versa?
All the time. In fact, I'm actually working on a new series that's going to be a paranormal comedy called The 80th Parallel. And so I'm able to take everything that I see in the study of UFOs, and I've also investigated paranormal sites myself. I've gone out and done documentaries, some really wild stuff. I like to go to the really unknown spots, places you've never heard of. So everybody else can have Area 51. You can have the crash sites.
Exactly.
You got 2,000, 10,000 people after those sites. I go to the more lesser-known sites, and do that kind of work.
Well, I find that
So,
more interesting, to be honest with you. You know, I like hearing something new for a change. You know?
yeah, and I stay away from the scary music in the background, and I try to be real about things. People ask me my opinion. Well, what is this with UFOs? And honest to God, we don't know. What it is. So I can't. I tend not to go with the alien theory. If my next door neighbor wants to call them aliens and they're from planet Zulu, whatever. That's their opinion. I just happen to believe that it's all, whatever it is, it's just another species that's also intelligent. They have their vehicles for whatever reason. They really don't care about us, unless you want to go down the, alien abduction route, too. That's another, fair area to be in. But I just think they've always been here. I mean, when you mentioned Ancient Aliens, the series, look at that. Look at the writings on the cave walls, It's just a phenomenon that's always been here, but they've always eluded men in certain ways. As we like to say, they're not landing on the White House lawn, and
Right.
there's no introductions happening.
Well, what do you think about the different shapes of UFO craft that are seen? We have the spheres, the cigar shape, the classic saucer. Do you think these are all piloted or controlled by the same, alien being or whoever they are? Or do you think that the different craft shapes could be different species or different?
Yeah, that's another common question. It's another tough one to answer because I think that too many people want to Hollywoodize what they're looking at. Where of course, the cigar shape that's transport. They're moving a lot of items around. The family goes out for a spin in the disc. And maybe if you're going on vacation, you take the triangle.
There you go.
I'm not quite sure. I think there's another side to it that we're all probably missing. We just haven't gotten there yet. And I tend to look at things. You bring up a good point about the shapes, because there are a lot of shapes, because most people who are tire kickers want to pretend, or in their mind, they want to see like the Ford factory on planet Zulu, and they're turning out, the triangle with fins this year. Oh, the fins are gone. Now we can see it this way. We're just not seeing, models that are exactly the same.
Right.
The same way you see a Ford, the Ford Fairlane, they made for 47 years, and you could see the development of it. It just, for some reason, it almost seems to be what people want to see at the time. I can't explain it, but you look at all the malfunctions that happen. We actually had an investigator who had gone, I believe it was to Arkansas, if I'm not mistaken, for a case, and she was set up on this guy's property on a ranch down there, or a farm, and this triangle object was coming at them. It was what the guy described that he was seeing, and they had all this sophisticated high-definition video and digital still cameras, everything set up, everything shut down.
Wow.
They didn't get a single frame. And as soon as the object flew over and moved out of sight, everything popped back on again.
Unbelievable. And you're right. I don't think I've heard of or seen two sighting reports where the object, matched, to the same thing. Now I've heard of some being similar, but
Right.
never exactly the same.
Yeah, but trust me, we are looking at that. For example, here's one little detail. If you look at just triangle UFOs, okay, your typical triangle report will tell you in the witness testimony that they're seeing a white light, a round white light at each of the three tips. Mm-hmm. And the underbody, at the center of the underbody, they're seeing a single red light. Well, I just looked at a report 2 days ago. It was three red lights, one at each of the three tips, with a single white light underneath. Well, was that the new 2013 model coming out?
Or they were going in reverse or something? I don't know.
I'm not sure. It's like I don't understand it. And then, of course, you have the whole theory that a lot of these technologies, we've back-engineered it, from crashed sites and everything, and we have all this technology. I'm sort of in the background listening to those stories and going, I would like to believe that's true, but I also wonder, like with what we're doing over in Afghanistan and different countries, why we wouldn't be using this technology to our advantage.
Right.
And why are we out scaring, women in the middle of fields and, on horse ranches?
And landing on the medium strip of a freeway, or like with your wife, right? Right.
Right. Right. Why are we doing that? And then there's another side of me that believes that a lot of this is some type of a projection. It's like a three-dimensional projection. The actual pilot is sitting in a room somewhere.
Yeah. So some type of holographic a projection of some sort.
Exactly. But then people counter me with, well, if they have that type of technology where they can send out, basically surveillance equipment. I mean, we even get the reports of baseball-sized objects. I've got a half a dozen reports just from last year of baseball-sized objects just going right alongside of a car on a freeway, following the car. And then it zips in front of the car and shoots off in some direction. I've got people on foot saying these things have come up and hovered within 5-10 feet from them and then zoom away, just like a ball of light.
Why isn't there a show on television, something like the History Channel or something? Why don't they do a show, half an hour show where they go over all of these sightings for the past week? I mean, there'd be enough content to, go longer than an hour. I think people would find it absolutely amazing, but I don't know.
We're working on that, but don't tell anybody.
Okay. Should I edit this part out?
No. Kidding. MUFON's growing right now. We have a great board of directors, and we've got a lot of new blood coming in. And like when you ask what am I doing as director of public relations, I'm going to be getting involved as time goes on with projects with network television. We have a radio project coming up, the MUFON Radio Network.
Excellent.
We've just got all kinds of stuff, public service announcements we want to get out. So we are interested in getting the word out about the organization. If any of your listeners out there want to become field investigators, or they just want to get my magazine every month. I also write for the magazine. I'm the editor, but I also always have at least some good feature stories in there. And the main purpose of that monthly journal is to really talk about current investigations or ones we've just closed out. And then the best we can do with an investigation is mark it as an unknown.
Right. Exactly.
But what else can we do? We weed it out. If it was a Chinese lantern, if it was, a mistake and somebody says, hey, I saw a cigar-shaped object. Well, you saw a 747 from the right angle.
Yeah.
Just the way the wings are, it's going to look like a cigar-shaped object,
Well, I had a guest on the show not too long ago that was concerned somewhat, I guess you could say, about how many cases in the MUFON database that are showing as identified, and he really didn't think there was enough investigation, et cetera, et cetera. I haven't looked at all of them or many of them that closely to be able to say yay or nay, but one thing I did bring up was, by the time MUFON gets the report, there's only so many questions that they can ask. I mean, they can't rerun the scenario, right, in real time.
Right. And we do get the cases like we had a case from January of 2011 in Florida where the object had actually landed in the witness's backyard. So of course, wow, we're out on the scene, looking for ground evidence. So we're always looking for the evidence. We're waiting for that bumper to drop off one day.
It's going to happen.
We're going to be out there to pick it up.
Well, I have been a MUFON member now for just over a month, I think. And
good.
I was able to get a MUFON meeting started here in Middle Tennessee. We had one in Knoxville. They had one in Memphis, but nothing in the Nashville area.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so we had our first meeting a few weeks ago. We have our second meeting coming up, and we have a place to meet now. And
Oh, great. That's Eddie Middleton territory.
yes, Eddie was my second guest on topic UFO, and he kind of got me interested. And from there on, I've been working with Eddie now since then. And just a great guy, just a really nice guy.
He is one of my favorite state directors. Just love the guy. He's just so easygoing, laid back. So if I am going to open up to somebody about a UFO, he's just a great person down in that state. Wonderful.
Well, listen, we are getting down here to the end of the show. Roger, I definitely would like to have you on again sometime because you just have so much more to talk about, and I don't want to just try to squeeze it in and go over it too quickly. Perhaps you could come back sometime, give us an update on how you're doing with this public relations thing and everything else you're doing.
Please have me back on anytime. I'm always here for you.
Okay, well, listen, one last question.
Sure.
What do you think, if these UFOs are real and they are coming here from some other galaxy or some other planet, what do you think they're trying to do here? Or what do they want? What are your personal feelings?
Okay, if it's my personal feelings, I don't want to. There is one segment of the listening audience out there that would be people who maybe follow alien abduction. I kind of have to push that aside. It doesn't appear to me that they're really that interested in humans. They seem to be just kind of doing their own thing. And it seems like they've been here forever. Mm-hmm. Sort of like, we coexist with the fly, for example. I don't really follow the flies around or try to communicate with them. They're just, I spot them once in a while, I don't invite them into my home, although they do sneak in, once in a while. So I'm trying to be a little funny about it because I really don't know. But, of course, if I said that, that they just sort of do their own thing and leave us alone, I would probably, then my next 50, emails are going to be from people who are, very strong with the alien abduction. Right. And that's a whole nother, we could just talk for hours on that some night.
Yes.
I have my own opinion. I could do a whole show with you just on that. I did get to spend some time with Dr. John Mack from Harvard University, who is one of the leading voices in this country on alien abduction. Sat down and talked with him for a little while. And, of course, we just lost Bud Hopkins. And Dr. Mack, of course, has passed away a few years also. But a whole different world out there with that. People think what they are mining us for something. Maybe they're creating another race or something. But it just doesn't, they don't violate, like, the Anderson Cooper side of our life, if I could say that,
Did you see the UFO episode on Anderson?
Yes. Yeah, what a debacle. I kind of thought that, and John Ventry, God bless him, he's the state director here in Pennsylvania, did a good job, but they surprised him, bringing a psychic on the show. Yeah. And even Joe Nickel, the skeptic, he's a pretty good guy. I see him on a lot of shows, but I think he just got a little bit more time and was kind of, poking fun at things, and we just didn't have the right people in the room to be serious about the subject.
Yeah, and that really upset me. It really did, because it just infuriates me how they try to do these, or say they're doing this serious show, and then there's always something at the end to make everybody look stupid or something,
Right, because people like myself, I am way beyond the question, do UFOs exist?
Right.
Of course they exist. They exist. They're out there. I could show you thousands of pieces of witness testimony. Mm-hmm. And Rick, if you take the percentages of people who are maybe just flat out hoaxing or lying, I mean, come on. If we could take that retired couple from North Carolina, get them together with the rancher, father and son in California, the teenagers from Nevada, And I could keep going. The poor woman, I keep saying, from the horse farm, that had to dive into the truck and drive 50 miles out of her way,
Yeah.
I mean, let's line these people up and look at just the witness testimony. Now, Anderson Cooper is going to demand, I want high-definition video. I want an interview with the aliens. I mean, come on, we got to bring Steven Spielberg in, to write the show. And it's not going to be a happy ending like that with the cute little alien that just wants to go home and phone home. It's not going to be that easy of an answer. But whatever the heck it is, Rick.
Well, I hope
here.
whatever you're working on will be very kind to our side of things, if you are working on something. Well, listen, we're getting down just here to the last minute or two. Roger, I hate to cut us off right here because it's just been a wonderful conversation. Definitely let's stay in touch. I enjoy reading your articles. I'll have all those links and things up on this show so everybody else can go check them out if they haven't already. And we'll definitely have you on again.
Great. Appreciate being here. I'll be glad to come back anytime.
Okay. Good night, Roger.
All right. Good night.
Bye-bye. Well, that was just a great conversation, was it not? I mean, can you imagine the type of information you would be privy to in his positions, both at MUFON and also writing for Examiner? I mean, you're getting this information pretty much firsthand, and then being able to talk with the networks and everything else. Wow, I wish I could do something like that. Roger, if you can give me a job and you can pay me what I make now, I'll go. All right, folks. Well, listen, thanks a lot for watching. We'll be on again in another week. And stop by topicufo.com where you can see all our past episodes. All right? Good night, everyone.